Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Couple of Nukes. As always, I'm your host, Mr. Whiskey, and I've got on, you can't see the bottom of it, but it's my Italian American flag black tank top because I was taking a look at our guest today, his website and all that, and we're going to get into gym, discipline, military. So I was like, the black tank top will be thematic, and if you're not watching, he's actually matching me with a black tank top, which is why I put one on. I saw his in most of his pictures, he had one on. So I want to be matching today. We're going to be talking about, like I said, the military life, the gym, discipline. A lot of times we talk about the gym. A lot of people think it's just about, oh, physical fitness and health. But as David Goggins has said, as a lot of people in the gym and fitness industry have said, and as we'll say today, it's also about what it does for your mind. There's a lot that happens with your mentality when you stay in shape and when you essentially force yourself to stay in shape in most of the cases. We are going to talk specifically about, as our guest today, his motto is turning pain into progress. So, Mr. Rob Wheeler here to share about some of the pain you've been through that you've turned into not just progress for yourself, but for many, many people through your podcast, through your coaching, through your speaking, and all your other venues. So, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. I love the cowboy hat, man. That's awesome.
Thank
I
you.
can't
Thank you.
I can't rock the hat. It won't work for me. So
Yeah.
you look good with the cowboy hat. Fits the Mr. Whiskey name. I
Yes,
like the
sir.
persona and everything. So a little bit about me. 10-year Navy veteran. Was in law enforcement for 17 plus years. In 2018, I was miserable. I left law enforcement because of PTSD, major depressive disorder, anxiety, and social anxiety. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I opened a gym in 2018 where I did strength and conditioning for 4 years. Unfortunately, I lost that gym due to COVID. That put me in a deeper, darker depression
Yeah.
because that was like my dream, my baby, my thing. But the consistent thing is my clients that I would see out in town, they would say, first of all, when are you going to open another gym? But then after that, they'd be like, we never met a coach like you. We never had anybody that was there
Nice.
for us like you. We never had anybody that had the motivation, discipline, the mindset to keep us going. And that kind of solidified me as Coach Rob and who I am today, and what led me into, I would say, insanity loop of personal development. Like you said, David Goggins, Jocko Willnick, all the guys that I look up to, and I was like, what do they have that I don't have? And it was just discipline, consistency over motivation. So, I applied that to my life times a million, and now we are today having a open conversation about all things mindset, fitness, discipline, mental health, whatever it takes for us to get over that hump and be successful.
For sure. And you said a lot that I want to touch upon. I'm going to start with the big question that you've probably gotten many, many times over, especially from veterans and active duty, especially at the time. 10 years, ladies and gentlemen, for those of y'all who don't know, that is the halfway mark to those retirement benefits. Halfway there, Mr. Wheeler. What was, how do you not go the rest of the way? That's the big
Well,
question.
it's, I mean, we'll try to abbreviate the story a little bit, but I was actually in Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was aboard the USS Roosevelt aircraft carrier.
Nice.
We got back after our deployment. Luckily I was blessed not to see combat. And I was with a Helo squadron in Jacksonville, Florida. And the funny thing is, so my MOS was Master at Arms, and for
Okay.
the military, non-military community, that's basically military police. So I was a military police officer. The squadron didn't want me, right? So when we were out to sea, they would put me at the ship police department, and when we were back at our home port, they would put me at the base police. So I never worked for the squadron. And throughout my career, I was having severe knee issues from all the arrests I made, from all the working out, from all everything I
Right.
had to do in my job.
The steel
I
toe
was a
boots.
yeah, I was a CB before that for a little bit, which is another very tough profession in the Navy. And every time I went to the doctor, they would basically say, "Suck it up. You don't have a knee problem. There's nothing wrong
Hmm.
with you. So compounding that over years and years and years, obviously the injury is going to not heal. It's not going to be sustainable.
Yeah.
So I get called into the commander's office for the Helo Squadron, and they had a thing when I was in called IA, internal augment, that meant that for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, they were going to have to give so many bodies up per command to go to Army warrior training and learn how to basically go to combat so you could actually go ground forces Iraq and go to war. And they're like, well, since you're the cop,
Right.
you're going to ground forces Iraq. I'm like, we just got back. I mean, we were in Iraq for six
Mm.
months, and my commander was basically like, I don't care. You have to go get fit for duty. I saw the doc, and he looks at my knee, and he's like, dude, your knees are all jacked up. And I'm like, I know, I've been
Yeah.
saying this for years.
Right.
That led to physical therapy, orthoscopic surgery, physical therapy. And then the last thing is I'm sitting in a doc's office and he's injecting steroids into my knee. And he's like, I say, Doc, I'm like, how long do I have to do this? He's like, the rest of your career. I'm like, I'm done. At that point, I was like, it's time to call it quits. And it sucks. And it still hurts every day that I have buddies of mine that made retirement and I didn't. But it
Yeah.
is what it is. It led to something else with more purpose. So,
Yeah, no, I get that. I think the sentiment of suck it up, ties well into one of the best sayings of the Navy, and maybe it's a military saying in general, but also one of the worst because it's a double-edged sword sometimes, is the expression take a hit and keep going.
mm,
There's a time and place for that, and there's a time and place for not that. And I think but a lot of people in the military just get so used to that mindset that they're like, all right, I'm just gonna, you know, ignore it. And there's a lot of quote self-medicating in the military. Sometimes that means alcohol abuse. Sometimes that means drug abuse. And sometimes that means not seeking medical attention. We've also had episodes on how there's a fear of losing, your rate, your MOS, your
definitely.
whatever responsibility you have, your command because of whether it's a mental health thing or a physical health thing, you know. And so I totally understand that. And I think, like you said, it's seeing some of the people you served with retire definitely is salt in the wound, but at the same time, at least what I believe is that there's a lot more potential for leadership and helping other people develop outside of the military. One of the
Definitely.
things I always talk about on the show is my long-term goal of creating a mentorship program that is a third-party organization that partners with the military to help educate newly enlisted and as well as young officers on finances, career, and help set up a long-term plan because and Mr. Wheeler, if you can share some of your experience in the military on this subject, what happened at my command was a random sailor was basically tasked with being a mentor to several sailors. And this is a person that maybe doesn't have a mentorship personality,
Mm,
already has like several other roles. Maybe they're an LPO, a division chief, whatever it was. They already had multiple positions and responsibilities on top of their job. They're standing watch. Now they've got five brand new sailors that they kind of just had this checkbox paper list they had to go
mm,
through. Did you meet this week? Did you meet for 20 minutes minimum, 30 minutes minimum? Did you discuss XYZ? Even when I was getting out, the separation process is a lot of checkboxes. Yeah, did I meet with a financial advisor? Yeah, the command financial expert. Some petty officer who says, "Yeah, I think I'm good with money," and he gets jabbed at being, or they get jabbed at being, the financial expert. And then they meet with you. They're like, "All right, did you fill out the spreadsheet? Cool. Now you can separate." Um, which obviously, you want to get through the separation paperwork. You want to go, but it can't be detrimental to young people getting out, whether it's early or the end of their first contract, to not be set up properly because they're just trying to rush out. But in general, there's not a lot of career advisement, financial advisement, or general mentorship, just about life in
mm.
general, especially the military, where your career is your lifestyle at work and at home, and where it can really affect a lot of your day-to-day habits and, activities. I think it's especially important that we have true mentorship that isn't just someone who got tasked with it and is trying to complete that checklist. I think a third party, and it could be military, it could be government, or it could just be third party, where especially veterans are designated mentors. And maybe they've taken a class to certify them for that, or they're just already doing that. And they actually sit down with these young people and actually mentor them and work with them. And I think this would help. We already know there's a high suicide rate, high anxiety rate, high depression rate. We already know there's a lot going on for these young people who I say young because most military members are 17, 18, 19, and 20.
Mm.
You get some people above that range, but the majority of them, I would say 95% of military members are 18, 19, and 20. And that's a time of growth. I mean, it's already proven that growing kind of goes till 25 already, and
Right.
then you always grow on top of that. But that is like that very sensitive time period, and they're getting out of high school, thrown into the military, and it's like now that's all they know about life, and it's not a proper representation of life, but it's also one that's hard to get used to. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
So definitely, like you hit a nail on the head. I had a veteran on my show called named Adam Peters, and he's actually fighting to try to change the TAP and transition program. And we have my episode hasn't aired yet, but we had a big discussion about that. And
Mm,
I think leadership from a personal development or mentor mindset, like you're talking about, is it's not even created in the military. Like you said, a leadership position is more based on rank and
yeah.
time served versus actually what you know. And I definitely think that there needs to be things in place. The TAP program, it's a dinosaur. That even with SkillBridge, I've heard horror stories where with SkillBridge, people aren't getting picked up for the jobs that they intern for. They're basically getting companies are getting free labor off veterans backs of people getting out. So
Man.
I definitely think, especially like you said, I remember when I went in, I was a little older, I was 21, but most people, yeah, they go in 17, 18, 19 and they don't know anything. And then you get to the military, and like you said, that's your life, and you're just, going through the motions of doing what you have to do to survive, not necessarily thrive. And there needs to be, like you said, whether it's civilian, government, whatever, there needs to be more things in place, not only for veterans, but for first responders too. This is kind of my wheelhouse. This is what I'm also
Yeah.
trying to lobby for or change the stigma because mental health affects everybody in a variety of ways, and it's not worth people losing their lives or their jobs or their livelihood because they don't know how to deal with problems.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, we talk about 17, 18, 19-year-old range, they're still at that time of their life where they're not sponges to the degree that kids were, but they still pick up habits and certain
Mm.
things that they witness. And I feel like every command I went to, it was always like the crappiest sailor who would be in charge of mentoring us, and he would teach us like the worst habits. And maybe that's not every command and every experience, but I feel like you pick up a lot of bad habits from sailors who hate their lives or hate the
Definitely.
military or just doing what they can to get by. And you need that positive kind of gung-ho leader, but instead what you have is, and we talked before on my show about that vicious cycle of the new people show up, they get mistreated by, people who are senior in rate or other, and they kind of just like task off their assignments to them, or they kind of abuse their positional authority,
Hmm.
even if they've only been in like 3 weeks more than you, right? As
Right.
long as they've
Right.
been there longer. And then what happens is those new recruits who then get to that position pay it forward. They don't say, "Hey, we got to stop this cycle of abuse." They say,
No,
"All
because
right, now
that's
it's
all they
our
know.
turn."
Right.
Right. And we see that in high school, even with the freshman Fridays, and we're the seniors. Now we get to bully the freshmen, and then when they're seniors, they're gonna bully the freshmen, right? And I actually had a shipmate I talk all the time. He tried to stop that toxic cycle on his ship, and they said if you're gonna not act like a proper quote proper senior in rate and use your power like that, then we're gonna treat you like one of the new guys.
Oh,
And they
wow.
tried to then haze, whatever you want to call it, right, to that degree. And then he went and got bigger leadership involved with it. And luckily, he had a responsive chain of command who was like, no, we need to make a better command. There's a lot of times where your command doesn't care. And what I'd like to ask your opinion on, we talked about leadership. You said time and service matters more than actual like leadership values to some degree. I found that a lot of the people who were leaders or in leadership positions had ranked up by, kind of screwing over other sailors by playing favorites or kissing up or playing the system, and that all the best leaders I had been withheld rank for putting their sailors first.
Mm,
And I saw a lot of people who fought for morale and for, good community where ended up leaving or being lower ranking. They left because they saw more potential outside of the military. And then the people who continued the cycles, who kind of hated their lives and took it out on everyone else, ended up being in power. The next thing you know, Chief says, "Hey, my wife's mad at me, so we're gonna stay 2 hours and clean more."
oh
But
man, I've
we
been
see a lot
there.
of leadership that will then reward people who screw others over, and then they're like, "Oh, perfect, you're a mini me," and then it just like this cycle. A lot of the stuff in the military and any organization that has these kind of issues is very cyclical, where it's like just these repeat patterns. What happens is it creates this mentality that the people who want to be who ya Navy and Army and all that are like, well, I don't want to be that kind of person. I'm getting out. So then all the good leaders are being filtered out, and all the same people end up rising to power. Now, I have seen, at least in my generation of sailors and soldiers, we're seeing a lot more changes in mental health, in leadership, in replacing leaders, in training. But again, with the size of the military, it's going to take a long time.
Mm.
Just like the equipment in the military, it's what, 10 years behind, 20 years behind, right? Everything is on a back order, so to
Right.
speak.
No, I agree 100%. And it definitely is a vicious cycle. And part of the problem is if you go to a bad command and, you're only at a command for what, 2, 3 years, and then you rotate out and then you get another bad command and then you rotate out. And
Mm,
so, when you do have a really good command, you try to hold on to that as long as you can. You try to stay there, you try to extend there. And most of the time, unfortunately, due to our
you
duties, it
can't.
doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we're in an age where, and it's crazy because, you're obviously a lot younger than I am. And for you to say the same things that I went through from, 97 to 2007, that's insane. That shows you the time gap of how things haven't
Yeah.
changed and that there needs to be a change in kind of the 20, 30-year guys need to start phasing out. And so some of the new leadership can come in and hopefully start to change things.
You know what they have changed? They've lowered the physical fitness requirements, the education requirements. In some places, the tolerance for drugs and the punishments associated with that. So they're changing all the wrong things. What they're doing is they're combating a retention and recruiting
Right,
crisis with
right.
let's get, and I say this as respectfully as I can, lower quality, individuals. We're going to
Well,
broaden that percentage of people who can join based on the requirements, right? We're going to lower the requirements so more people can join. I'm not saying they're worse people or lesser people, but I mean, statistically speaking, these are people who are less physically fit now, who are not meeting the same education requirements, the same physical fitness requirements, right? So they're just trying to broaden the pool of people that can join instead of saying, hey, we need to fix things so that our people who do meet the requirements want to stay in, you know?
and yeah, and I agree with that. And I don't think you have to be nice. Like we're in a society where everybody's soft and weak and dumb and
Yeah.
the military, like you said, we need bodies. And we used to be like the strongest fighting force in the world, and now everybody has some sort of mental health issue or learning disability or the obesity epidemic. And so you're
Yeah.
right. I don't think standards should be lowered across the board. If anything, standards should be raised, and those people that can make it should be applauded and promoted and given what they want in the military.
Yeah, I remember I can't remember where I heard it. Maybe it was on social media. It was like hard times make strong people make good times make
Yeah,
soft
yeah.
people make hard
I've heard
times, and
that
it's this
before.
cycle,
Yep.
right? And that's why I feel like we're in that phase right now with America. Like you said, people are just hanging out on social media on their phones all day. They're going to, getting their coffees, their overpriced coffees, their the obesity, that this and that. And it's interesting that a lot of Americans who indulge in that culture look down at other countries that have kept the physical fitness standards or the dietary standards or, education standards, and they see it as dictatorship and controlling and this and that. Yet those people are living so much. Like I see so much of the people who push for fat. And I always say it's not fat is beautiful is an issue. It's fat is beautiful, therefore it's healthy. That's the bad
Mm,
mindset, right?
yeah.
If you are a heavier set person and you want to feel confident, right? I'm all for that, right? But you have to understand like there are health issues with that, right? Like so the idea that people are pushing for that, and then I see a lot of these fat fluencers, as they're called, who are dying of a heart attack, or they're in the hospital because they're all they do is mukbang videos, and now they had a stroke or a blood pressure spike or
Yeah.
this or that. It's like you reap what you sow, and you see these other countries, the people are skinny, they're beautiful, they're living to like 100, and they're following a diet that is far healthier than America's diet. The you could not believe I watch these reaction videos sometimes where people from other countries go to like the cereal aisle in like a superstore in America and they can't believe it because it's like hundreds of cereals, most of which are bad for you.
Full of
It's
crap.
just crazy. But I think, like we said, you need to keep those strong leaders. And what I found is you mentioned the short command time, and I found a lot of good leaders said, "Hey, I'm just not going to be at this command long enough to make a positive enough impact or to make a good enough impact that will last. Or there's always someone higher up than me. I can only control my little division. And within that, I'm already dealing with pushback from the other divisions, let alone helping all of reactor or topside or aviation, whatever it may be. So a lot of military leaders that I've talked to, at least, have felt kind of very limited in their power.
Mm, yeah,
Whereas, like you and I now, as civilians, we can reach as many people as we push out forward to. There's no chief
definitely.
saying, "Hey, you can't tell this person what to do with their life that you're coaching them on self-development." Like there's a lot less red tape to some degree. So I think there needs to be a lot of change, like you discussed.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like you said, it's few and far between when we find those good leaders. And you're right; they're usually the people that they didn't get ranked up or they didn't suck butt to the command, and they looked out for their people. They made sure everybody got back off of liberty, and they made sure that the people that got over intoxicated made it back to their room safe. The ones that take the extra time to
Yeah.
actually be a mentor or more like a family member to that sailor versus just a ranking officer and saying do what you're told or else kind of mentality.
Yeah, and I've seen some, at least in the Navy on my ship we called it being a blue falcon, where you would
Oh yeah,
screw over
that's
other
a common
people.
term, bro, since I've been in.
And I've seen some shipmates just like go out of their way to so quickly ruin other people's lives over the smallest little mistakes that can be fixed,
Yep.
whether it was maintenance related or other. Um, and I think I've seen people, just report a whole bunch of other people for doing stuff or similar stuff just to save themselves from or reduce their sentence at mast. And one of the worst things too is like I physically witnessed leaders that would say, if you bring me XYZ items as a bribe, I will sign this checkout or give you this qualification. Like
Oh
I've seen
wow.
actual bribery promoted. I've seen, and people are gonna hate me for this saying this, but I've seen people who are like, hey, if you sleep with me, like I
Yeah,
will
no, that's a
promote you.
Common
Like that
thing. Yeah,
happens.
no,
It's
that
and
happens
it's
all the
not
time.
anything against women or men, right? I've seen it on both sides. I actually saw it was a woman who was telling men if they slept with her, she would sign their qualifications. And which is ironic because usually you always hear, oh, this woman's doing this for men and men are, sexist for saying that. No, I saw the opposite. Like it happens both ways,
I believe
you
it.
know? And so yeah, it's an unfortunate culture. You got out of that due to medical reasons and you transitioned into law enforcement. So I'm very curious. You mentioned the year 2018 is that's toward that time period where the whole all cops are, XYZ and that really hating on cops and police brutality quote movements were happening. I'm just curious, because I know my father, he was a police officer for 25 years and it was a very different mentality around
Mm,
policemanship when he was in and the stories he would tell compared to you were kind of in that time period toward the latter half of your service where the societal view on police culture shifted. Did that affect you in any way, or did you kind of get out before that really happened?
No, so luckily, and I guess there's bad apples everywhere you go, and obviously one bad cop
Yeah.
can make it bad for any department. But I live in Florida, and where I live in Florida, they're more pro law enforcement than they are anti law enforcement. And from 2012 to 2018, I was actually a VA police officer for Veterans Affairs. I was federal.
Okay.
Now I am Florida State certified, and after I lost my gym, I did actually go back into a police department in 2024. But the amount of crime that I dealt with, seeing a young man commit suicide right in front of me, and other issues, I just at 40, I think it was like 46, 47 at the time, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. There's got to be more to life than being a police
Right.
officer, because when you take a veteran that has mental health issues and then you go become a cop for, another 10, 12 years on top of that, and compound that plus everything you see, plus everything you deal with, I was literally like just destroying my life around me. I lost my first marriage. I was married for 18 years. And yes, it goes both ways, but due to my anger, due to my mental health issues, that was the major downfall of my
Mm.
first marriage. So it took a lot of, I didn't have an effect as far as negativity of society. um the
Okay.
negativity that took effect would be like, so as a veteran police officer, I was always arresting the same veterans, and when I first got to the command, I'm like, I want to help the veterans, I want to be there for the veterans. And then I
Yeah.
started to realize that there's a lot of veterans who are actual pieces of shit and bad people. And
Yeah.
seeing the bad over the good every day, and being at a place just like it was like being back in the military, going to work, everybody's miserable, nobody's happy, no one wants to be there, no one wants to do the work, no one wants to stay late, no one wants to do overtime. So you compound that negativity when you're already a negative person, and it's very hard
Yeah.
to get out of that dark operating in the black area. So that was my struggle in law enforcement, not the actual community of people, but the effect that it had on me as a person.
Okay. And I'm trying to track. So, were you working on a military base or it was a veteran hospital?
It was
Like
the VA hospital. So I live
VA
in
hospital.
Florida, and the West Palm Beach VA. I was there for 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. And so you talk about arresting veterans now. I've been to the VA hospital, at least here in Savannah, once now, and it's mostly just a bunch of older folks sitting down, just discussing stories. So what kind of arrests are you making? Are these people who are trying to harm people, destroy the building? Like what kind of arrests are you making?
My calls varied. So most of the calls, and I don't know how it is at other VAs, but we had what was called a code green, and a code green is usually an irate patient. So that can be
Yeah.
90% of the time, it's either mental health issues, veterans having like a psychotic break where they want to fight the doctor or fight the people in the hospital,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
a drunk veteran, or a veteran on drugs. I dealt with a veteran on bath salts before. So,
Those are bad.
like, I'm surprised I mean, you said you only went there once, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Savannah, I'm assuming the hospital is pretty big. My hospital is pretty big, and so more city, and they like to put the VA hospitals kind of in the ghetto, so that didn't help.
yes. Yeah,
And
that is so true. Thank you
and
for
a lot of
saying that.
times the outside agencies. So what kind of sucked about my job, an outside agency would arrest a veteran, and whether the person was a veteran or not, if they'd be like, "Oh, I'm a veteran," the cop would dump them on us because they didn't want to deal with it. So we'd have to deal with
Mm,
it. So a
that's
lot of
interesting.
transients and stuff like that as well. So it just varied from what I saw and dealt with.
Yeah, it is sad. I know the alcohol and drug abuse, we mentioned it in service. I think post service, it's much, much worse,
Definitely.
especially if they get involved with the VA and they get certain medication administered to them and then they become addicted or they start getting
Yep.
more and more. We've had some former addicts who are veterans on my show before, and the downward spiral is very fast, very messy.
Definitely.
And it's changed over time. You know, a lot of the veterans I had were around 9/11 era. talking about that in the VA was very different in their treatment than they are now. But now we have different issues like just making veterans stoned all day, so they don't have to deal with their PTSD instead of, working with the root causes there. And I did want to ask, speaking of PTSD, I know you mentioned serving on deployment in the Middle East and dealing with PTSD. Were you ever shot at, injured, or blown up nearby, kind of near your area
No,
where you're stationed
so
at? What was that like?
so I was lucky to not really see combat as a military police officer. My job was more ensuring the safety of the people on the ship while we were, in Iraq. And
Okay.
then I did some like entry control point supervisor stuff. Just when they're like bringing trash trucks in to get rid of the trash or supplies or whatever. And that, yeah, that's kind of scary because you always have that thought that, oh crap, I'm going to get blown up
Right.
with an
Yeah.
IED or something. But
Oh
no,
yeah.
my actual PTSD, surprisingly enough, what mine stems from is my first ship. I went to a small little destroyer class ship in 1997, and back then they didn't have integrated females on ships. It was all males, and I attribute
Right.
that first command. When people ask me about it, it was like being in prison. The biggest guys, I wasn't a weightlifter at the time. I didn't have muscles. I didn't know how to fight or protect myself. So I was physically abused on the ship on a daily basis. I was starting to be
Mm.
thrown overboard. I was starting to be killed.
Oh
Like,
wow.
yeah, it was a very scary time. And that's what actually led. I remember, like, crap, I'm getting the crap kicked out of me daily. That's when I started going to the gym and picking up weights for the sole purpose of getting muscles to fight back. So,
Yeah.
my PTSD and trauma is from my first command. It's not really anything combat related. So I do have, or I did have a little bit of survivor's guilt. I had a lot of friends that did die in combat. I had friends that did commit suicide. So stuff like that. I remember the, I went to Disneyland. I go to Disney World all the time. I'm a big Disney adult. And I went in the Hall of Presidents, and they show this beautiful thing about America at the beginning before the presidents speak. And they show like combat related stuff and military. And I just broke down. I had to walk out. I can't go in there and watch that because it just makes me think of the people that I lost in my life.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Little side pause for anyone not watching. When Mr. Wheeler says he's a Disney fan, he's got all Star Wars collector's items on the shelves behind him right now. And
Star
and
Wars tats
there's
too.
there's there's one I've never seen Star Wars, I'll admit, but you've got a guy riding a creature back there like that. That alone looks like it's a pretty high price tag item back there. What is that character riding?
So that's from the Disney show Mandalorian,
That's what
which
I
is
thought.
played by Pedro Pascal, and that's they call it a blurg. It's like a giant dinosaur thing
Oh, okay.
that they ride in one of the episodes. So
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I've never seen anything Star Wars. I was gonna watch The Mandalorian just because uh no, maybe it was The Mandalorian. I had an ex who I think was obsessed with Boba Fett, and my one buddy on base, he had like a $325 replica helmet that like made
oh
noise and
wow.
everything, and so he was showing it off. But yeah, yeah, so big Disney guy, and I was gonna say it's interesting you mentioned the survivor's guilt because you talked about seeing, we had a guy on the show, Marcus Hart, and he talked about he was a supply guy. So right before everyone deployed, he would issue them their supplies and then they
Mm,
would come back. And he was the last person they saw when they left and the first they saw when they returned, if they did. And he said sometimes people wouldn't return and like he
wow.
was like one of the first to know. And
Yeah.
he had been one of the last people to see them. So he like struggled with that. And you know, I had Jonathan Taylor, Marine sniper rifle expert, come on the show, and he spoke about. He asked me my personal opinion. What is the root cause of all these veteran suicides? Numbers vary. Some people say 22 a day. Some people say up to 44 a day. We know it changes. We've seen an alarming rate, a rise in female veteran suicides by firearms. Right, we've seen a lot of scary statistics, negative statistics, and I know it's real because every military member I've had on the show pretty much has talked about losing someone they served with to suicide. So, what is your personal opinion on it as far as like what is the cause? We look at the people who, because I've been asked about it, I'm like, you know what? It's interesting because it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, man, woman, chief, officer, newly enlisted, you've been in for 10 years, 20 years. If you're a veteran, it's all across the board. If you plotted the demographic, I mean, it would just be everywhere because it
Right.
just really is anyone at any time. So what do you think of all of this and what was your personal experience with it?
I definitely think it's two things. It's trauma first, like not dealing with our traumas and our issues, because one thing that I'm constantly fighting for is trying to break that stigma of mental health of that,
Yeah,
whether you're a veteran or a cop or a firefighter, we have that I'm broken, I'm no good, I'm damaged. We don't know how to decompress from the job and the horrors and the things that we've seen. So trauma being number one, and then number two, purpose. In the military, you have a purpose, you have a role to play, you have a job, you feel important. When we get out as veterans, we don't have a purpose. A lot of us, that's the biggest reason why veterans have
yeah,
mental health issues. That's the biggest reason why veterans get overweight and why they don't try to live healthier lifestyles, because a lot of times we lose that purpose and then we just give up. It's like, what are we fighting for? So trauma and purpose, I think, are my two biggest things. For me personally, it was personal development. Like I I constantly operated in the black. I was constantly negative. I was the constant fuck my life. I hate this shit. Everything sucks. Life is garbage. And one day, like it's just weird. I can't explain it. One day I was like, man, this I can't live like this. Like enough is
yeah,
enough. Like I've been to therapy, I've been on medication, and I think I was like listening to something on social media or scrolling, and somebody said something to the effects of just practice gratitude. So the first thing I did when I heard that, every night, literally every night since then, when I go to bed, I think of three things that I'm thankful for. So that could be my wife, that could be my house, my kids, whatever. It could be the same three things, it could be three different things. It doesn't matter. So whether you pray to a God or the universe or you speak it into existence, I'm thankful for my wife. I'm thankful for this house. I'm thankful I got to go to the gym today. I don't
right.
take anything for granted anymore. And then the second thing I started doing, and even today, because I was a little off today, but even today, as soon as I wake up, before my feet hit the floor, I say, today's going to be a good day. And even today, being a
Mm,
little, I still have some bad days and being a little like off today, I'm like, it's
yeah.
going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. It's going to, if I say it a million times, so be it. Those two things were huge in changing my perspective. And I've been able to like deal with things a lot better now as they come. I was the kind of guy, if someone cut me off, I would flip out. Like I was just always angry, always upset, always frustrated. And I think that's just because I never really dealt with the trauma. So, trauma and purpose are once again the two biggest things. So,
Yeah, for sure. And we talk a lot about gratitude, and what I will say in regard to, what you believe contributes to veteran and active duty suicide is that at the time of this recording, 10 days ago was my 2-year anniversary of leaving the military, and I put out an episode reflecting on military culture, my personal experience, and some of the stuff going on with my shipmates who are still in. And one of the things I talked about was a lot of these guys and gals who are counting down, they got the app on their phone or a calendar the day till they get out, and they think it's going to be this daydream come true. And then they
mm,
get out and they
yeah,
don't
nothing.
instantly get this amazing job that everyone's hyped up. It turns out that being a veteran didn't qualify them for every job or for like any job they wanted based on their resume
Definitely.
sometimes. That their military training and skills were very job specific, to the military, or that not to what they want to transition into. Fortunately, like I know a lot of people who, hey, they did one thing in the military and it's complete opposite of what they want to do civilian side, but the military didn't have what they wanted civilian side because they didn't have the billets or they didn't have whatever it was. Or we've seen a lot of people get screwed over with when they're choosing their job, whether the recruiter kind of twisted the truth on them, if they just wanted to ship out faster or later, so they picked a different job, if they got led on by an shiny bonus tag, So we see this where veterans, they transition to the civilian world. They don't instantly get the dream house, the dream
Right.
girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. They don't get the dream job. They're having a hard time connecting with civilians. I thought people were people, but there's a part of you that's kind of changed forever, I believe. And I
Definitely.
don't push that whole once military, always military, you're a hoorah, hoo-yah guy all the time, right? But there is a part of you that is different. And that goes a lot into like the purpose we talk about. Like you said, people lose their purpose in some situations, most situations in the military, actually, most military members had some kind of positional authority or leadership at some point, whether it was over their watch station, whether it was a assigned position or something they ranked up to, right? So now you're losing that purpose. It's like people get out and it's like you could be a master sergeant, you could be a master chief. Does means nothing in the civilian world. You're just another guy or gal.
Right.
You're just
Definitely.
another person. So I definitely do believe that. I know a lot of veterans who end up taking like a gap year, try to figure out their new identity, and they struggle. And a lot of them, if they don't find it, they really struggle. And then again, like you said, the trauma and PTSD. And what I want to focus on specifically right here, just because you're today's guest, is you talked about dealing with some trauma and PTSD, how it bled into your first marriage, your relationship, and then probably your social life, your work life. It affected, you as a cop as well. What kind of trauma and PTSD were you dealing with?
I mean, I think, like you spoke about just now about like jobs and stuff. I was a military police officer for 8 out of my 10 years of my career. That's all I knew what to do. And when you get out as a police officer, you can't go be a high level executive. You can't, like you said, you're kind of
Right.
locked into doing whatever it is that you did in the military. So after my severance pay ran out and I'm like, oh crap, what's next? What am I going to do? The easiest thing was for me to go be a federal officer. And I worked for Department of Defense first for 4 years before I transferred over to the VA. But I kept going from like essentially military. And even though I was now a civilian, every organization I worked for was still a paramilitary organization. They still
Mm,
had rank, they still had structure, they still had so all the bad shit that the military gave us and everything we've talked about on this episode, that was carried into the police departments too. So I wasn't able to escape that. I wasn't able to run away from any of the previous issues I already had in the military because they were continuing on in the jobs I was in. Because most of these guys are all former veterans, they're all former
yeah.
military, they're all
Yeah.
former cops. So it was just a destructive path um, of a like an insanity loop that always continued and continued and continued. And once again, I didn't have, my friends were veterans and then they were cops. And when I came home, I didn't know how to differentiate the stuff I went through at work, dealing with criminals and bad people, and then being not able to decompress from that and set that aside and say that's my work and now I'm home. So,
Mm,
if my former wife said something to me and I didn't like what she said, I would just flip out. And it's not that I didn't care or that I wanted to, emotionally or verbally abuse her.
right.
No, I didn't know how to deal with anything. No one taught me. Like you said, we need better tools to help the people that get out of being in the military. So they realize that, okay, you may not want help from a therapist or you may not want help from a medication or both, but you have to get help somewhere. Because if
Right.
you don't heal your trauma or if you don't try to fix your trauma, it doesn't go away. Like I still have PTSD, I still have depression. There's some things that still bug me. Now, obviously, it's not as bad as it was, and I can speak on it and I can help people overcome it. But if you don't heal from that trauma and you keep stuffing that stuff down, eventually it's just going to explode and it's going to ruin your life. And it's ruining a lot of people's lives because the stigma of, once again, like, oh, well, I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to lose my wife or girlfriend or boyfriend or
Mm,
whatever, or, people are going to look at me weird or,
right.
there's something wrong with me. And no, everybody deals with shit. It's how we overcome the shit that makes it, more important and makes us resilient in who we are. So that's kind of like what I teach and what I do. So
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, you talk about your PTSD and your trauma, which we can classify as pain. We mentioned earlier turning pain into progress. So you talk about eventually you recognized a need to kind of overcome your trauma and PTSD to work on healing it. What kind of was like the wake up call for you? Like, how did you figure that out? And like, maybe there are some people listening who have trauma and PTSD and they think it's not affecting their life and they don't need to treat it. Well, like, what was the wake up call? Because for some people, unfortunately, it's hitting rock bottom or going beyond rock bottom. And we don't want that. We want to avoid that if we can.
So interesting enough, like you said, you reflected on your Navy anniversary. My wife was cleaning out. So I've been married for just over a year now, but I've been with my wife for almost 8 years total. Um, and she was cleaning out her closet, and she found a letter that I wrote in 2017. And at 2017 is when I ended up starting dating her. Well, it was a typed letter. And so she hands me this letter, and I'm looking at it. And the letter, and I don't even remember like typing this out or printing this out or whatever. And it said like very interesting things like fix my relationship with my daughter because when I started going through the divorce, my daughter, who is an adult, I like lost my relationship with her. It was uh, not be angry towards my current wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend. So not be angry towards my current girlfriend. So after I destroyed my first marriage, like I knew that there had to be a change, and we tell a story. So in 2017, when I first moved in with my wife, I was supposed to go to Tampa to visit my parents for like Christmas or something, and I left my wallet in a Publix. And so my wife is, we're in the bedroom, we're sitting down, I'm like, I'm flipping out, right? I'm having what I call an adult temper tantrum. I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm throwing shit. I'm attempting to punch my hand through the wall, all
Mm.
over losing a stupid wallet. Something that shouldn't take my energy, right? Something that shouldn't
Yeah.
flip me off, make me so angry. So this happens in 2017, and my wife says that that was always kind of like a red flag with like, well, I don't know if I should continue with this because that's kind of scary, right? And she has been in some abusive relationships and stuff, and so she's like, oh, great, the cycle's repeating itself. Well, I would say it was last month now. Last month we went out to dinner, and I left my wallet in the restaurant, and we get home, and I tell the wife, I'm like, babe, I left my wallet in the restaurant. And I'm not freaking out. I don't care. Like it didn't bug me.
Wow.
It didn't affect me. It didn't. I'm like, and she looks at me and she pauses. She's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You
Right.
don't even care. Like your driver's license is in there, your credit cards are in there." I'm like, "This is just stuff. Like it can be replaced. Like I'll call them if they have it. Great. If not, I really don't care." And she's like, "Where's my
Wow.
husband? What did you do with him?" And
Yeah.
so that's a perfect example right there of I just decided that at some point in my life, and maybe it comes with age, because as we get older, we do, get a little wiser and we don't let stuff affect us as much. But I came to a point where what is taking my energy? Am I going to put my energy into being physically fit, into eating healthy, into helping people overcome their trauma, into being a role model for my kids, a pillar of the community? Or am I going to put energy into getting mad because someone cut me off, or because I lost my wallet, or because I knocked over the trash can and garbage spilled all over the floor? So I think we have to kind of relearn things as veterans and as anybody that has a trauma or an issue. Whatever that trigger is, we have to decide that, okay, we can't give it energy. And we can't give it energy because we know that nothing good comes of that. And no matter how mad you get, how angry you get, it's not going to make the problem go away. So why, it's that old saying, control what you can and not worry about what you can't. And I think really I honed that. And that's what keeps me from, having these adult temper tantrums and not being a big angry guy anymore and just, focusing on the good over the bad.
Yeah, and it's no secret that we have limited time and energy on this earth, so
Definitely.
to invest it so heavily into things that, like you said, don't deserve our time and energy and our waste time and energy when we have more important things in life to focus on is a great mindset shift to have. Now, what I do want to focus on, we talked a little bit there about the mental health and mindset portion, but from the very beginning, we've mentioned a lot about the gym. where did that kind of, I know you mentioned a little bit about how and why you started, but can you kind of take us through the whole journey up until now, your relationship with fitness, the highs, the lows, and the role it has played in all of your healing and all of your teaching?
Definitely. So what's interesting about my coaching, I operate on three pillars. So fitness is the first pillar. So it goes fitness, then mindset, then discipline. So I take a client and I look at their overall health and fitness, nutrition, what they're putting in their body, what kind of activity they're doing. And then if I can fix that or get them to do some form of movement, the benefits we know just outweigh. There's no like bad thing that can happen from doing any form of activity, right? Like the benefits outweigh the bad things. So that starts to build resilience and that starts to build consistency. Then I can hit them with the mindset and be like, okay, well, you need to start journaling. You need to practice gratitude. You need to use this emotional trigger tracker and write down what's triggering you. And then the discipline to continue to work on themselves long after I'm done with them because I don't want to work with a client forever. I want them to be self sufficient. I want them to be self sustained. So basically, when I got out of the military, um, I blew up to just like over 300 pounds. I was 300 pounds. I was probably like
Wow.
38, 40% body fat. And I went to do this was in 2007. I went to do my first mud run. It was called Warrior Dash. I've never done a mud run before. It was up in Tampa. And my buddy was a professional photographer. So he took pictures of us during the race. And when I saw those photos and I saw all this fat and man boobs and just just looked
Right.
disgusting, seeing the look on my face where I had to huff and puff through a 3 mile race where I could barely get over obstacles. And that point on, I remember at the time I didn't really have I had the fitness knowledge from the military. I did bodybuilding. I had a guy that took me under his wing and he taught me about bodybuilding in the military. So I kind of was a bodybuilder, but I didn't really have any real fitness and nutrition knowledge. And I remember going to Planet Fitness down the street from my house, and I literally would jump on the treadmill for 30 minutes, the elliptical for 30 minutes, and then the bicycle for 30 minutes. And I would do that over and over again every day until I started to lose weight and I started to see a little bit of weight reduction. And then I started hitting the weights again. And then I started reading more muscle mags and bodybuilding magazines and getting into the nutrition. And then from there, when I was a VA officer, I started intermittent fasting. And that really helped me dial in the weight loss. It's something that worked for me. And from there on, I decided that I was always going to be healthy and fit as possible because fitness is the fountain of youth. Like I can tell you here as a 48-year-old man who I squat, I deadlift, I bench press, and I do heavy ass weight. It
Right.
keeps me able to move. Now, it didn't get rid of my military injuries, bad knee, bad back, but I tell everybody that if I didn't work out, like I would fall apart. Like if I didn't work out, I wouldn't be able to move. I wouldn't be able. I live in a two-story house. I have to go upstairs. This is stuff that
Yeah.
honestly I wouldn't have been able to do if I didn't get into some sort of health and fitness routine. And I don't think it gets rid of the injuries, but it definitely helps keep us mobile and moving. And you can deal with a little more pain versus just sitting on a couch binging Netflix and rotting into nothing. So
Yeah. No, I'm totally behind that. And I think sometimes when we're just living the day to day, we don't realize where our health is at, and it takes that outside perspective, like you got with those photos and videos from the mud run, that kind of wake up call moment where you're like, oh wow, like,
yeah, definitely.
because day to day, just seeing yourself in the mirror is just routine, right? But to see that dynamic moment captured, I think that's a great example. And, what would be your encouragement? I know you talked a little bit there about the benefits, but to a lot of us listening who are injured or overweight, I mean, you just had that wake up call and decided to go after it, but some people are lacking that discipline, lacking that motivation. I mean, what would you say to them?
So what I like to tell everybody, first of all, you have to find what works for you. You have to find what you enjoy. Now, just because I believe in strength and conditioning and I weight train, that's what I love. Okay. So that's helps me stay consistent because I love it. Right. So
Right.
you first of all, you have to find what you love, whether that's swimming, running, biking, walking, some for jujitsu, some form of activity. But the amazing thing that people I don't think realize is that if you can just walk, if you can just go outside and walk, or even on a treadmill, but go outside and walk for 30 minutes, walk around your block. And if you can't do it for 30 minutes, start with 10 and then build up to 20 and then up to 30.
Right.
The benefits of walking are insane. It's low impact activity. It doesn't take much time. It makes you feel better. You get outside, you get some sun, you get some fresh air. Like, I think walking is so highly underrated, and that the people that do some form of activity and they go for an afternoon or evening walk, it's just that much better. I try to walk in the afternoons. I try to get 10,000 steps a day in addition to my training. I can clear my head. I can do social media while I'm walking and give my Coach Rob speeches. I can listen to a podcast. I can
Right.
listen to the
Couple of
nature
nukes.
around me or news or whatever. Like, the benefits of walking outweigh anything. So,
Yeah.
very low impact activity. Anybody can do it. It doesn't cost anything. It's just one of those things that you have to start doing.
Yeah, I think when you realize it's that simple to start, you really have no excuses at that point. And even I know, like for me, living a sedentary lifestyle, sometimes podcasting, sometimes 10 guests in a row, an hour each, right?
Yeah,
Sitting
it's a
here
struggle.
all that time. I had invested into getting the stationary bike pedals for under the desk. You know, maybe it, I'm sure it's expensive, but we've seen those like walking desk treadmills where you
Yeah.
have a desk and a treadmill, or even just getting the standing one at least, or you're standing, but preferably if you can get, I think that stationary bike pedal, it's not the same as walking, but it's still low impact. You're still moving, you're still circulating, just doing anything you can, those little things in between your day. And I always say I'm so thankful for my dog because she forces me to have to go out and walk. I don't have a backyard to just let her run loose, and she's got to go, and I walk her around. And it's funny, she holds me accountable too, because if I try to go on a shorter walk sometimes, she'll be like, "No, we're going for the full walk today." And sometimes if she's really feeling it, like she's like, "We're going for an extra long walk," and because she'll pull one way, I'm like, "All right," and it's funny. Well, actually, she'll pull one way, I'll pull the other, and then we'll kind of stare at each other for a few seconds. And I'm like, I really don't feel like walking today. And she's like, I do. And,
That's a great accountability partner right there.
yeah,
So,
yeah. And, great practice for, she's my little princess. So, she's taught me like what the woman wants, we're going. She says, we're walking, so, but yeah, you talk about, I really like what you said about finding what's best for you because so many people get this mindset of, oh, I gotta go lift weights. Like they see all these guys and gals on Instagram or whatever doing, like for women, you might think, oh, I gotta do what all these women on Instagram are doing. I gotta do the Stairmaster. I gotta do Pilates. I gotta do CrossFit. Or if
definitely.
I'm a guy, I
There's,
gotta go run, or I gotta do
yeah,
deadlifting, bench pressing. You don't have, you could go like, I like you mentioned some non-traditional ones that people think of like rock climbing. You could go do
yeah,
climbing. You could go do bouldering. You could do maybe like I've got a dear friend of mine, Steve Wright. He does jump roping every day, and
very good.
he counts his jumps and everything, and it's pretty cool. But for me, I'm much more a cardio guy. I need to lift more, but like I really enjoy cardio. I rather go like I ran for 2 hours straight the other day. I rather
Wow.
do that than bench press like 200 pounds. Like, and I know to some people they're like I rather I would
I'd
never
rather bench
run
press
two
for
hours
two
straight.
hours
Yeah,
than run for 2 hours straight.
yeah,
I used to run cross country and track all the way up through college, so I don't run as much anymore because I used to run all the time. But
yeah,
even I think you have to be well rounded. I like to lift weights. I like to walk. I like to go
yeah,
run occasionally. I want to get back into jujitsu. So uh, I think even like, man, even if you want to just watch TV and binge Netflix, you can still ride an exercise bike. You can still walk on a
yeah,
treadmill. Like, there really is no excuse. And with like Timu and Amazon, you can really find things that aren't that expensive that are
yeah,
going to allow you to stay physically fit. And one of the major things I think also that people don't realize is when I have a client or I'm dealing with a client, I don't ever put them on a diet. I hate that word diet. I don't think well, you hit a really good point with the false sense of social media and people just get
Yeah.
confused over, like you said, I should do this, I should do that, I should do this diet, I should eat this, I should do
Oh yeah,
no,
keto
like
diet this,
yeah,
that
no, like
fasting that. Yeah.
the major problem with most Americans, it's all overconsumption. So when I have a client, I don't tell them you can't go to McDonald's. I tell them you can't go to McDonald's and get 4 cheeseburgers every week like you used to. No, instead of 4 times a week, go down to twice a week. And then once they do that, okay, instead of 4 cheeseburgers, get two. Okay. And then instead of that, instead of the, large diet soda, get a small Coke. Like just changing little things to have healthier habits. And
Right.
just that alone with a little bit of walking, and you would be amazed at the results people could make. It doesn't have to be a big, complicated, scary thing. I think you brought up a very valid point that people just get very stuck in the details of what they think they should do, and then you get frustrated, and then you decide not to take action.
And you know what else too is like I struggled with a long time with the idea of quote gymtimidation. I didn't want to go to the gym because I was a skinny guy. I was bullied my whole life for being very skinny. And I didn't want to go and work out and then be tired and sore in case anything happened, right? Yeah, I realized one day, you're never gonna be at 100% and you're never gonna get to a greater level if you don't go. And one thing I will say is like, yeah, there are some jack guys and gals athletes in the gym, but for the most part, it's skinny people trying to bulk up, heavy people trying to, cut down. Like it's regular people. What you see on
Right.
social media, these influencers, you don't, you'll see some people. There are some genuine people on social media who are showing their fitness journey, and you can kind of tell the difference, but there's a lot of, this kind of front of these super jacked guys or these super fit girls, and then you think, man, the gym's just full of these like super soldiers. I don't want to go. That's like a small fraction. It just happens to be the fraction that's online in your face because, they're the ones going to the gym and recording themselves and making content. You'll find that most of the people who actually go to the gym don't record themselves the whole time or do this, right? And there's nothing wrong with making content every now and then to promote what you do, right? Sometimes I record stuff post run or me lifting, right? There's nothing wrong with that, but you shouldn't let people who you shouldn't get this false expectation. One of the saddest realities, one of the saddest reality checks, I'll call it, that I had probably last year I found out that so many of the gym guys I followed online were on steroids. They weren't
Mm.
natural, and that broke my heart because like I refuse to use steroids. It's and trust me, there are days it's tempting. I've been underweight my whole life, and for me with my hypermetabolism, even on weight gainer, lifting is the only way I gain weight, and it's hard to stay consistent for me. I try my best to go. But the weight gain is slow. It's not overnight. But I see all these guys online who are super jacked and they make it seem like it's so easy, it's so overnight. And they talk and then you find out they're on steroids and it's so tempting, but I'll never cross that moral boundary, me personally. But to find out, like it was really heartbreaking. So what I'm trying to say with that is don't let these people online intimidate you or make you feel like you have to be at such an extreme level.
Mm.
Like we're saying, you can do what you can do
Well,
and slowly work your way.
the one thing, and I wanna hit on this, like you said with social media. So if you go to my content and probably your content, I'm very authentic. I don't sugarcoat anything. I don't do any photo edits. I don't do anything other than what you see is real, 100% me all day, every day. And I've made it even at the point of maybe not having as many followers or being as popular. I don't sugarcoat anything. I've always, like you said, I don't want to pass that boundary. I want to be my authentic self. People have to realize that most social media is a highlight reel. It's not their real
Amen.
life. It's not
Highlight.
their reality. They are putting on their what you want you to see. It's essentially the same thing when you see someone film a cop or a criminal or somebody do something that's bad. You don't get the whole story. You only get what is shown to you. So you have to realize that when you're following these people and you're scrolling their content and you're absorbing their content, most of the fitfluencers or the influencers, even me, they're there to sell you a product. Okay. I want you to resonate with me because I want to help you, but you're going to have to pay for my services. I mean, that's how I make my living. These fitness influencers, same thing, whether they're hustling their supplements or their clothing or their gear or the gym they go to, whatever, it's not real. So you have to unplug from that and realize that once you said like do what works for you. Like if you love running, dude, run your ass off. Like that's awesome. As long as you're doing some form of activity and you're eating somewhat healthy, like that's good enough. And the gym intimidation is it's a stigma. Okay. I would say, yeah, there's some probably high level gyms where there's, massive bodybuilders, popular gyms like Gold
Yeah.
Gyms in California, Venice Beach, stuff like that. But most people, they want to get in the gym, they mind their own business, they want to work out, and they want to go home. They don't care if you're jacked, if you're fat, if you're skinny. Everybody's there their own purpose. Like most of the time, society does not give a crap about you. Like so people have to stop worrying about what does the gym think about me? We don't care. Just come in there and work out. Have fun.
Yeah, it's people hate to hear, but it's like you're not that special that when you walk in the gym, everyone's gonna look at you and be like, "Oh,
I
there's
mean,
there's
I
Mr.
wish I'd
Whiskey."
walk in and people like, it's Coach Rob,
Yeah, I mean sometimes
yay.
the front desk lady, she really convinced me one time. I was on this ab twist machine, and as I twisted, and she set off the lunk alarm. I was like, "Yeah, that's right, killer six pack." And then she goes, "All right, everyone, the gym's closing in 10 minutes." And I just set off the lunk alarm so everyone would know. And I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay. Maybe next time." As much as we'd love for all of us to set off the lunk alarm. But yeah, I think, and for me personally, I know there's a lot of hate and negativity in the world. It's a lot of it is online, right? If you're posting your fitness journey and stuff like that. But if you actually go to the gym, most people aren't going to come up to your face and say something like, "Oh, you're a fat pig," or "Oh, you're so skinny." Like you said, most people mind their own business. And for me, like when I'm at the gym, like I have a lot of respect for everyone there. I'm like, look, that person is on a journey just like I am. And
Right.
I've never understood that mentality of like making fun of people. I already had some conversations on other shows about this. I woke up sick one morning, went out for an 8 mile run. I couldn't breathe through my nose. I was sore throat, but I said, we're going to go train because that's what we do. We stay hard. And near the end of that, I'd been running for 8 miles already. These two punk kids, and say kids are like in their 20s, you know, drive by with the windows down, the slow golf clap, the whistling, the sarcasm. And it's like, I just have never understood that mentality. What I've never once found joy from, first of all, I mean, I had the mindset of I'm never gonna make fun of someone who, even if they look tired or they're going slow, lifting weights or running. For all I know, they're on mile 20. They're on their 200th rep. I'm never gonna judge. For all I know, there's someone who is far more athletic than me. But I've also never found joy in spreading negativity. I know not everyone's like that, but for me, it's like no matter where you're at your fitness journey, if you're pursuing your health, I have so much respect for you because there are so many people who abuse this choice. It's a choice to go work out, to be healthy. It's a choice that we have every morning, and some of us don't have that choice. We are disabled, we are paralyzed, we are just not mentally capable of it, whatever it is. And so I am forever grateful. That's one thing, like, yeah, maybe I don't lift the heaviest in the gym, but the fact that I go there and do that, to me, it pays respect to everyone who can't, to everyone who wishes they could, for everyone whose fitness journey was stalled by pregnancy or by injury or what it may be, by people who never got to pursue it. It's a choice that we have to make every day. And so anyone else making that choice as well, I just have so much respect for. And so I would never, intimidate someone at the gym. I also have a mentorship personality that if I saw people who were struggling or embarrassed, I would explain how, I was in the same place. I mean, I'm sure when you first started working out, it wasn't easy, right?
Yeah,
It's not
definitely. We
supposed to
all
be easy.
we all have our starting point, right? And I think you have to remember that when people go in the gym, like you said, whether they're skinny or overweight or whatever, we all started from somewhere. I was, essentially morbidly obese, and I had to start somewhere. And I had I think we all go through that insecurity. We all go through that body dysmorphia. We all go through that, like you said, we want to look like certain individuals, but you have to get to a point of acceptance in your life. And if you're healthy, if you're fit, if you're eating healthy, if you're doing all the right things, and I love that. I love the gym culture of the people that are trying to change that. And I'm definitely the kind of person that if I see someone lifting wrong as a coach, I feel like it's my duty to ask if I can talk to them and correct them or help them. Or if someone doesn't know how to use a machine, like we need, and this is why we're doing this podcast. This
Right.
is why you do a podcast. This is why I do a podcast, because we want to be the change makers of the way of thinking that it's better to be kind, it's better to have a service mindset, and it's better to help those that can't help themselves. So I definitely agree with you 150 billion% on that when it comes to the gym culture, gym community, and um, theories of acceptance and how we should treat people in society.
Yeah, and you just mentioned your podcast. I know I mentioned it in the very beginning. We never name dropped and really spoke about it, so I'd love for you to share that along with your website, which we'll have in the description below for everyone who wants to check out your shop, your coaching and speaking, your blogs, and or to contact you, just learn a little more about you or working with you, as well as your podcast. Who should listen to your podcast, kind of what is covered on there, and why should we check it out?
So, first of all, the podcast is called the Battle Harder Podcast. It's on YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Um, my podcast is all about storytelling, whether that's people who have guests on my show who have overcome trauma. I've had guests on my show that have lost everything and they rebuilt their life 10 times better. I've had neuroscientists, psychologists, people that have science backed data on being in shape, dealing with mental health issues. So I'm trying to tell a story that if you're dealing with something, no matter what it is, it could be obesity, it could be eating. I had a lady talk about eating disorders, mental health, overcoming trauma, building businesses, any kind of struggle. They need to go to the Battle Harder podcast and they can find an episode that resonates with them, and either they can contact, because I always same thing, I link the description in the on the YouTube, so you can always contact the people that I speak with and use their services, or you can reach
Right.
out to me. And the best place to find me, I'm very my biggest platform right now is Instagram, at Battlefitted, but I'm on TikTok at Battlefitted, Twitter, everywhere at Battlefitted. If you just Google
Yeah.
Battlefitted, my ugly face will come up somewhere in that search. And then the website is battlefittedbrand.com. And obviously, there they can find the coaching, they can find the link to the podcast, they can find, so Battlefitted is the name of my business. And Battlefitted, that's what encompasses the coaching. I have a clothing line, the podcast, everything in the way of mindset and helping people just be better and become the best versions of themselves. So,
Yeah. And so as we wrap up this episode, I know we spoke about a lot. We dove into the military conversation for quite a bit there, from leadership to suicide to veteran civilian relations to your battle personally with trauma and PTSD to the mindset shifts involved around that to recover, and then the role that fitness plays in that as well. Encompassing all of that, taking in all of it to leave one message for everyone and for myself as well as we end this episode, what would be the one message you want to put forward more than any other?
I guess it's two things. One, I always tell everybody, and I say this on my show all the time, you have to have a limitless belief system, not a limited belief system.
Mm.
When we have a limited belief system, that's where all the negativity, that's where all the hurt, that's where all the problems come from. We are so strong and resilient and amazing and smart. And if you have a limitless belief system, if you truly believe, and I had a neuroscientist give me data backed on this, whatever you believe you can achieve, whatever you speak into existence directly goes into your subconscious. So if you say, I'm great, and you say that times a million, compounded day after day after day, you're going to be great. If you say, I suck, and you compound that day after day after day, your life's not going to get any better. So you have to have a limitless belief system. And the one thing when I always end my podcast is tell everybody to be fit for battle. And that doesn't mean battle like going to war as a soldier or a sailor or airman. It means being fit for the battle of life. And how do we do that? We take a complete approach to our life. You have to do an assessment of your life, and you have to have good mental health, good physical health, good nutrition, friends, family, people, a support system, and you have to be fit for battle. So when anything happens, no matter how big or small, you can overcome that.
Yeah, and I'll say one of my favorite quotes, better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in
Mm,
war.
I love that quote.
So to be battle fitted, or as the Navy says, always ready. I think
Always
it's
ready.
super important. And Mr. Rob Wheeler, I really want to thank you for your time today, for, hosting these discussions both on your show as well as with me right now, not just for military, but for everyone, for their families, for civilians, for everyone who is dealing with any trauma in life. PTSD and trauma, it's not just combat related, it's not just military
Right.
related, it's not just law and first responders. There are a lot of things in life that can traumatize us, that can haunt us. And
Mm.
so it's so important, going back to what you said, where do we want to focus our time and energy? What can we be grateful for today? What do we have available to us today? And what are we choosing to do with our lives? So I thank you for choosing to come on the show today to invest your time and energy in this conversation to help others do better.
Yeah, no worries. And to everybody listening, check out my podcast because we're going to have Mr. Whiskey on my podcast. We're going to have some more great discussion. So I appreciate being on the show. This was fun.
Sailing through the ocean blue, nuclear reactors my crew, guiding the ship, the stars as our guide, through the waves we ride, jokes and laughter fill the air. On this voyage we have to share, working together, side by side, as one family we will abide. In the heart of the ship we reside, nuclear operators with pride, powering the vessel with every stride. Our mission, a source of great pride.